Great to see everyone this morning. It's good to have our visitors with us today. God devoted over 1/4 of the book of Genesis to the life of Joseph. We see that in the last 14 chapters of the book, Genesis chapters 37 through 50. Joseph was the second to the youngest and the favorite of Jacob's children. And because of his favoritism, because of his special gifts that he received of his father, Joseph's brothers were eaten up with envy. They did not like him. But instead of following their first intent to kill him, they decided to go ahead and to sell him into bondage, and he was carried away into Egypt. But through God's providence, Joseph rose to great power. He was second only to Pharaoh, so he was the second most powerful man on the earth. A widespread famine happened, and this was certainly foretold in one of Joseph's dreams. And it forced Jacob's family to go and buy corn in Egypt. And this is where his brothers came face to face with Joseph. Not wanting to reveal his identity, Joseph dealt very roughly with his brethren, trying to pretend that he didn't even belong to them. He was not kin to them. These dealings caused them to remember the sin that they committed against their brother Joseph. In Genesis chapter 42, verses 21 through 22, they said one to another, "We are verily guilty concerning our brother, in that we saw the anguish of his soul when he besought us, and we would not hear. Therefore is this distress come upon us." And Reuben, he's the oldest of the brothers, answered them, saying, "Spake I not unto you, saying, do not sin against the child, and you would not hear? Therefore also his blood is required." So the sons of Jacob were certainly grief-stricken about Joseph because they sold him into slavery at the young, helpless age of 17. Joseph's brothers were guilty concerning their brethren for several reasons. They saw the distress in his soul. He besought them, but they wouldn't hear. And how sad that is. Now, what do you do with your children? Do you hear their cries? Since parents are stewards of their children's soul, it causes many parents to become grief-stricken. Why? Because many children are delinquent when their parents are negligent. Children are a blessing to the home, as was read in Psalm 127, verses 3 through 5. Children are an heritage of the Lord, and the fruit of the womb is his reward. Never have youth ever been so studied, analyzed, misunderstood, admired, feared, pampered, and persecuted as they are today. Your children deserve many things from you as a parent. They deserve to hear you pray and to do so on a regular basis. They deserve to go to worship and Bible class on a regular basis. They deserve to see you sacrifice for the Lord rather than what many parents do is sacrificing the Lord. They deserve to hear you talk to others about becoming Christians, letting them know that you really are concerned about lost souls. They deserve to go with you to visit the sick and the bereaved. This helps to train them. They deserve to be taught the Bible by you, not just the Bible class teachers. They deserve to hear you praise the church and her Lord. You know, men make mistakes, but our Lord is perfect. They deserve to be encouraged by you to seek and to obey the truth always. They deserve to see you putting the Lord church in your giving instead of just giving the Lord your dregs, your leftovers. They deserve to know Christ, deserve to see Christ living in you. Not just talking about Christ, but him living in you. We need to be setting priorities in our home. Where are our priorities when we are early to the game, but we're always late to worship? You have your children always do their school homework, which you ought to, but what about their homework for Bible classes? You let your children stay up late on Saturday night but you don't let them stay up late on a school night. You won't let your children miss public school. But what about Bible school? Sometimes we parents schedule vacations when we know there's going to be a vacation Bible school or gospel meeting coming up. But we don't schedule those vacations during public school, do we? They see us going to work not feeling well. But we stay at home under the same circumstances from church. If the home justifies sinful behavior, defies authority, ridicules those who seek to do that which is right, then the problem with our youth lies squarely in the laps of the parents. If we bring them up with a silver spoon in their mouth, but we don't give them the discipline and the guidance that they need, we sin against them. They not only become a disgrace to us, but to everybody else. Nobody likes to be around an undisciplined child. A nation, a community, the Lord's church is not any better than the families that make up those entities. As Solomon said in Proverbs 14:34, righteousness exalteth a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. You know, children don't really need money or the pleasures of this world more than they need the ennobling care and the help of their parents. Having it hard sometimes makes us stronger. It helps us to learn responsibilities. And parents are to bring their children up in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord, Ephesians chapter 6, verse 4. If children and parents sow to the flesh, in other words, to a worldly life, then they can expect to reap the corruption of the soul. As Paul said in Romans 6, verses 7 through 8, we're going to reap what we sow. And some parents, they just refuse to raise their children up. And sometimes I'm talking about raising their children up with a good spanking. And therefore, they're going to reap in sorrow. We need to show our children as a sacred trust, and not just as another mouth to feed. Because as Jesus said, for of such is the kingdom of heaven made, Matthew chapter 19, verses 13 through 15. So let's look at several ways that parents can actually sin against their children. Now, one way parents can sin against the child is by failing to control them. In Deuteronomy 21, verse 18 through 21, there's a very hard and strict law that was given to the Jews. I want you to listen to what Moses wrote. Deuteronomy chapter 21, beginning in verse 18. Excuse me. He says, if a man have a stubborn and rebellious son, which will not obey the voice of his father or the voice of his mother, and that when they have chastened him will not hearken unto them, then shall his father and his mother lay hold on him and bring him out to the elders of his city, and unto the gate of his place. And they shall say unto the elders of his city, this our son is stubborn and rebellious. He will not obey our voice. He is a glutton and a drunkard. And all the men of his city shall stone him with stones that he die. So shalt thou put evil away from among you, and all Israel shall hear and fear. Now this law, of course, is very harsh, no doubt, but it served two purposes. First of all, it made the children to strive harder to obey their parents so that they would not be, stoned to death. But it also made the children to strive harder to obey. Now, the Bible, of course, is replete with instructions and examples concerning discipline or the lack of it. We read of Eli, who is one of the high priests of Israel. He lacked parental authority with his two sons, and we read of this in 1 Samuel chapters 2 and 3. He had two sons. They were careless, they were irreligious, they were loose in action, they were very scandalous, wicked young men. But then neither did Samuel's sons walk in the way of the Lord, as we see in 1 Samuel chapter 8. But Eli was condemned by God because he failed to control his two sons, whereas Samuel apparently tried, but just was not able. So Eli sinned against his children by not exercising control. Now, the book of Proverbs, it is full of instructions concerning discipline. Solomon said in Proverbs 13:24, he that spareth the rod hateth his son, Now, he acts as if he hates his son because sparing the rod is actually withholding useful discipline to allow that children to see the error of his way. A child left to himself will bring shame to his mother, Proverbs 29:15. Proverbs 23, verses 13 and 14. Using the rod is not going to kill him, but it will save him. And Proverbs 29:17 says, correction brings rest and peace. Now, Paul, of course, he's going to warn that we need to use great wisdom whenever we administer discipline, that we do not provoke the one being disciplined to anger in Colossians chapter 3, verses 20 and 21. So when discipline is used wisely, the generation is closed by preventing that child from wandering away. Children respect parents who administer discipline to them. And it's pretty obvious by the way children act that they don't respect parents who don't administer discipline. In fact, I've heard some children call their parents some pretty bad names because they were not disciplined as they should. Respect and authority are learned characteristics. They're not something that we are born with. Ephesians chapter 6, verses 1 and 4. No child comes into this world knowing how to obey their parents. It's something that has to be taught to them. And therefore, it's important for parental authority to begin early in the home life of that child. As Brother Gary Colley, who is one of my instructors in the preaching school, said, either train them in the playpen or visit them in the state pen. If they don't learn to respect authority at home with the parents, they're not going to respect the authority of their school administrators. They're not going to respect the authority of government officials. And they're certainly not going to respect the authority of God himself. Parents, do not be afraid of your children. You are the one who is in authority. And you have the right to command and to demand obedience. Another way parents can sin against their child is by a lack of training. Excuse me. It's very important to teach and to train a child to live right and to avoid the wrong. As we're told in Proverbs 22, verse 6, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. And as we train them, we need to see both the positive and the negative aspects of that training. Training children demands constant attention by the parents. It's not going to be something that's going to be accomplished just by maybe 1 or 2 times a day, maybe 3 or 4 times a week. It's going to take a lot of time. It's going to take a lot of energy. It's going to take a lot of interest on our part in our children. The priorities of the parents are certainly not correct when they give more time, more attention, more discipline in training their pets than they do their children. When we become more interested in our jobs or our recreation than we do in training our kids, then something is seriously wrong. We need to get our priorities straight. We have to plan how to construct the home and to train our children rather than letting chance take its course or letting the world dictate how they're to be trained. You know, we have to speak often of Christ and of God in the home in front of our children and not just speak about the world or the school that they go to, whatever they're doing there, or our jobs. Since God intended the home to be the training place for children, it's going to be a monumental failure if it is not a Christian home. Jesus asked 2 important questions in Matthew 16:26. For what is a man profited if he should gain the whole world and lose his own soul? Or what shall a man give in exchange for his soul? If children are not shown the way to heaven, then we parents have become failures, and we have sinned against our children. One other way we can sin against a child is by refusing to give them the right example or pattern. Children are more than likely to do as we do rather than do as we say. Children need something that can be imitated. But sadly, in the home, oftentimes the examples are allowing them to lie, to cheat, to steal, to curse, and every other sin under the sun. Your child should see you studying your Bible. They should see you offering thanks unto God. They should see you encouraging the work of the church. And they need to see you sacrifice for the preaching of the gospel. If they don't see us putting spiritual things first in our lives, how in the world are they going to be, how should we ever expect them to put spiritual things first in their lives? And when we don't do this, we become the worst enemies of God and of our children. God approved of Abraham because he commanded his children and his household after him, Genesis 18:19. Abraham was an example to his children. He didn't compromise God's instructions even one whit, but he obeyed God completely through unwavering faith. So it's no wonder when God told him to go and sacrifice his only son, that Isaac was voluntarily bound and voluntarily laid down on that altar in Genesis 22, verse 9. Remember, Abraham was over 100 years old at this time. He was getting feeble, but Isaac was a young, strong, strapping young man. And if Isaac did not want to be laid as a sacrifice, then I don't think Abraham could have ever forced him. But that tells you how strong he was, that he took the wood that was going to be used for the sacrifice and he carried it himself to a place that was afar off. Isaac was not a weakling. But Abraham was a great example of obedient faith. And that's why Isaac was willing to do whatever he was told to do. Parents are to exemplify in their own lives what they want their children to be. Children will follow a pattern. As parents, we are to train up our children in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord, Ephesians chapter 6, verse 4. And as examples, we are to let our lights shine before men, that our God may be glorified, Matthew 5, verse 16. How important it is that we do that before our children, to show them the proper example. Brethren, children are not a drudgery. They're a blessing. They're an heritage of the Lord. And with such great blessings, time and effort has to be used in their training and in their raising so as to be pleasing to the Lord. One thing we should all want is for our children to go to heaven. They have to be taught that. And they need to be taught that by you. So you need to be the proper example. You need to be teaching them and training them each and every day of their lives. Your influence will live on through your children. So live as God would have you to live. Do not sin against the child. Be the proper example. Be a Christian and live as one. Don't take Christian living for granted. Now, I know a lot of people, it doesn't seem like they really care a whole lot about their own souls because they don't take Christianity very seriously. But if nothing else, think about your children and your grandchildren. Be the proper example, be the proper Christian, and raise them as one. And if there's something that you need this morning, whatever it may be, maybe you need to obey the gospel. Now just say, well, I'm going to go ahead and take my children to church and train them to be good Christians, but you're not one yourself. You don't think your children won't be able to see through that? That you are not the real Christian that you act like you are? Be a Christian. If there's anything that we can help you with this morning, whatever it may be, let your need be known while together we stand and sing.